"You're violating health codes," Marvin barked, pointing at the dog like it carried the plague. Ellie didn't flinch. She just knelt beside the trembling veteran and his companion. "Then I guess kindness is against the law now." Ashwood, Montana wasn't the kind of town where people expected drama. Tucked between pine-covered hills and rolling amber fields, it was the sort of place where everyone knew your car by the sound of its engine. Flags hung from every porch. Kids still rode their bikes to school. And on Main Street, the scent of cinnamon and baked apples drifted from the little bakery with the pale blue awning. Cinnamon Rise, the soul of the town. At the heart of it all was Ellie Hopkins, 43 years old, widow of an Air Force mechanic, brown hair always tied back in a bun that seemed to defy gravity and time. Most of Ashwood knew her simply as Ellie from the bakery, and most days that was enough for her. She didn't need applause. Her joy came from small things: pouring the first coffee of the morning, listening to Mr. Harmon grumble about fishing conditions, and handing warm bear claws to bleary-eyed Air Force cadets from Raven Point Base. But Ellie had a soft spot few recognized, and one regular who tested it daily. His name was Joe Rivera, a lean, quiet man in his late 30s, with eyes that never seemed to focus on the present. He came in twice a week, always at 7:30 sharp, and never stayed long. He'd order black coffee, sit in the corner booth by the window, and speak only when spoken to. His service dog, Baxter, a golden retriever with graying fur and soulful eyes, sat faithfully by his side. Most people in Ashwood ignored Joe, not out of malice, but out of discomfort. He wore the same dark hoodie even in summer. His hands shook slightly when he held the cup, and when a balloon once popped during the 4th of July parade, he'd gone pale and bolted. But Ellie never treated him any different. She'd always greet him with a soft "Good to see you, Joe," and sometimes sneak an extra scone into his to-go bag. If Baxter looked thirsty, she'd bring over a ceramic dish of water. It wasn't pity, it was presence. And that was what made Thursday morning so unforgettable. The bakery was packed. Kara, the high school barista in training, was fumbling lattes, and the hum of local gossip buzzed louder than the espresso machine. Ellie had just handed Mr. Jensen his usual apple turnover when the front door slammed open. Enter Marvin Ellis, City Health Board representative, visiting from Helena. Navy blue windbreaker, clipboard tucked under one arm, and a personality forged in the fires of bureaucracy. He swept into Cinnamon Rise like he was inspecting a crime scene. Excuse me," he called out, weaving through customers. "This establishment is subject to routine inspection." Ellie wiped her hands on her apron, stepping forward with calm professionalism. "Good morning. I wasn't informed of an inspection today, but—" He cut her off with a raised hand. "Don't need to be informed. Surprise checks are protocol. We've had reports of code violations." "Violations?" she echoed. That's when his eyes locked on Joe and Baxter. "There, that's one." He marched across the room, pointing at the golden retriever like it carried the plague. "Animals are prohibited in food-serving establishments unless they're registered with the state." Joe's entire body tensed. Baxter, sensing it, pressed closer to him. "He's a service dog," Ellie said firmly. "Fully trained, certified." "Certification papers?" Marvin demanded. "He doesn't need to show them. It's federal law. And you're scaring my customers." "Your customers?" another voice interjected, sharp, feminine, and rehearsed in the art of dismissal. It was Vivian Chambers, regional director of the Brioche & Co. bakery chain, and Ellie's boss ever since Cinnamon Rise had been acquired 2 years ago. Tall, icy, and always impeccably dressed, Vivian looked out of place in Ashwood, like a mannequin that had wandered off from a Fifth Avenue window display. "I saw the video, Ellie," Vivian said, not even glancing at Joe. "A dog in the bakery? That's all it takes to tank a brand. People assume fur in the dough, drool on the floor." "That dog," Ellie said slowly, "has never caused a problem. He calms a man who gave everything for this country." Vivian's waved her off. I can't afford bad optics. You're terminated, effective immediately." The room fell silent. Not a single customer moved. Joe tried to stand, but Ellie reached out, steadying him with a gentle hand on his arm. "It's all right, Joe." Then to Vivian, "You're making a mistake." Vivian's lips tightened. "What I'm doing is protecting our reputation, and as of now, you are no longer employed." Marvin, puffed up with authority, nodded approvingly. "We'll be filing a report." Joe quietly stood, gripping Baxter's leash like a lifeline. Ellie untied her apron, folded it with care, and laid it on the counter. No one said a word, not a single person in the bakery, not Mr. Harmon, not young Kara, not even the mayor's assistant at the back table. No one moved, no one protested. And Ellie?
She simply straightened her shoulders, placed a hand on Joe's back, and walked out beside him. The bakery door didn't just close behind Ellie, it echoed. The soft jingle of the bell gave way to a silence far heavier than before, the kind that settles on a place when something good has been taken from it. The air inside Cinnamon Rise had always carried warmth, cinnamon, laughter. Now it felt cold, artificial, like someone had turned off the soul. The morning rush thinned quickly. Nobody finished their coffee. Conversations died mid-sentence. Kara, still frozen behind the counter, stared at the empty space where Ellie used to stand. She had worked under Ellie for almost a year, made mistakes daily, but Ellie had never once raised her voice, only smiled, taught, and encouraged. And now she was gone. For what? Letting a man with a service dog sit in peace? The moment replayed in everyone's minds, louder now that the bakery had gone quiet. The sharpness of Marvin's voice, Vivian's cold decree, and Ellie's gentle goodbye. By noon, the video was online. A high school volunteer from the Air Force Family Youth Program, Leila Mendoza, only 16, had recorded the entire encounter on her phone. She hadn't meant to post it, just wanted proof in case Joe needed help. But after school, something inside her snapped. She uploaded the clip to TikTok and wrote, "They fired the nicest woman in town for letting a veteran bring his service dog into the bakery. Watch how nobody stands up for her. Hashtag Stand with Ellie." The video exploded overnight. By morning, it had 600,000 views. By noon, 2.3 million. Comments poured in. "She stood up for a veteran and lost her job. Are we serious? That's not just a dog, that's his anchor. Imagine firing someone for kindness." Within 48 hours, news outlets picked it up. "Montana woman fired for helping veteran with PTSD," the headlines read. Small town, big outrage. From cinnamon rolls to canceled. But in Ashwood, something deeper than online fury began to take root. Joe stopped coming. The corner booth where he used to sit with Baxter remained empty. The air around it seemed heavier, like the absence of something vital. Without him, the bakery felt incomplete. Without Ellie, it felt hollow. Customers trickled in, glanced at the counter, then turned away. The laughter was gone. Conversations were stiff. Even Marvin, whose name became a local synonym for smugness, had retreated from public view after the video caught him wagging a finger in Joe's face. Mrs. Chambers tried to do damage control. She issued a statement calling the incident a misunderstanding, blamed Ellie for escalating tensions, and announced a new, veteran-friendly seating policy. But it was too late. Trust wasn't something you could rebrand. People stopped coming. Tourists posted bad Yelp reviews in solidarity. Locals whispered apologies they never got to give. And Vivian, once untouchable, watched her carefully manicured reputation begin to unravel like an over-baked croissant. Meanwhile, Ellie was quietly rebuilding. She didn't speak to reporters. She didn't respond to interview requests or online attention. Instead, she moved in with her cousin Reese and began helping out on his small farm just west of town. She woke before sunrise, milked goats, stacked hay, and smiled when the wind carried the faint smell of cinnamon from downtown. She missed the bakery, but not the noise. Most importantly, she held no bitterness. Some people need to lose their comfort to find their conscience, she told Reese one evening, brushing flour from her shirt. I just did what felt right. He nodded. And that's why they miss you. Back in town, regret became routine. Mr. Harmon started leaving a free scone on the booth where Joe used to sit. Kara left a note near the register. Come back, Ellie. We're sorry. Even the mayor, who had once praised Vivian's expansion plans, began avoiding press questions about the bakery. But Ellie didn't want a parade. She didn't need validation. She just wanted peace. It began with a low rumble on a Sunday morning, the kind of sound that doesn't belong in a town like Ashwood, not on a quiet, pine-scented street where wind chimes sing and dogs nap on porches. The kind of sound that makes people step outside, hands shielding their eyes and scanning the tree line. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't a storm. It was engines. And not just one, a whole convoy. From the eastern road, the one that twisted past the tree-covered ridge and led to the old Air Force highway, came the first sighting. 2 Humvees, painted desert tan and shining like freshly oiled steel. Behind them, a boxy armored personnel carrier, followed by 2 transport trucks, the kind usually seen rolling into conflict zones, not sleepy towns with one blinking stoplight. They moved with purpose, military precision, not fast, but not uncertain. The convoy stopped. Right outside Cinnamon Rise.
Ashwood didn't have traffic cameras. It didn't need them. Every movement in town was witnessed, noted, and, within moments, shared. By the time the third vehicle rolled to a stop, half the town had gathered, phones out, faces pinched with confusion. Children clutched parents' hands. The mayor in sweatpants peered out from behind the ice cream shop. Kara stood on the bakery steps, apron still stained from the morning shift. Then the passenger door of the lead Humvee opened, and a man stepped out, tall, silver-haired, in full dress uniform. Every inch of him screamed command. Medals shone on his chest, stars shimmered on his epaulettes. But it wasn't just his appearance that silenced the crowd. It was the way he moved, not like someone visiting, like someone coming home. "Is that?" someone whispered. It was General Edward Sloan, retired commander of Raven Point Air Base, now an advisor to the Joint Chiefs. A man rarely seen in public, let alone in a bakery parking lot in Montana. He walked toward the bakery doors, flanked by 3 officers and a younger aide who clutched a sealed folder like it contained a war plan. Inside, Mrs. Chambers stood behind the counter, pale and rigid. She had clearly seen the convoy approach. Her smile was tight, controlled. "General Sloan," she said, stepping forward, "we weren't expecting." "I imagine you weren't," he said. His voice was calm, but it carried weight, like gravel coated in velvet. "I'm not here for croissants." The room held its breath. Sloan placed a photograph on the counter, then another, then a letter, thick with official markings. Finally, he turned to face the crowd that had started to filter inside behind him. He said, "My name is General Edward Sloan. I served 36 years in the United States Air Force, and if you'll give me 5 minutes, I'd like to talk about someone who never made rank, never wore a uniform, and never stopped serving." He paused. No one moved. "Her name is Ellie Hopkins." Murmurs, gasps, phones recording.
She ran this bakery, but she also ran something else, something none of you knew about. For the past 8 years, Ellie Hopkins coordinated an unofficial support network for veterans suffering from PTSD. She provided food, safe space, conversation. She helped them find therapists, navigate VA paperwork, and, in more cases than I care to count, she kept them from taking their own lives. He turned toward Mrs. Chambers. "You know Joe Rivera? The quiet man with the dog? He saved my life in Fallujah during a classified operation in 2007, took shrapnel in the leg, and kept me breathing long enough to get to the evac point. I owe him everything. And when I finally found him again last year, broken, silent, barely hanging on, he told me there was only one place in the world he felt safe. Right here, at this window seat, with his dog, and a woman named Ellie who never asked questions, only brought him coffee and kindness." The crowd had gone utterly still. Sloane's aide stepped forward and pulled down the bakery's old sign, Cinnamon Rise in fading pastel letters. In its place, they unveiled a new wooden placard, carefully engraved, "Ellie's house, where coming home begins." Sloane turned back to the crowd. "She didn't ask for recognition, but we're giving it anyway." And just like that, Ashwood remembered what it had forgotten, that heroes don't always come with medals, but they leave marks, just the same. The new sign gleamed like morning light on still water. "Ellie's house, where coming home begins." Nobody spoke at first. The words seemed to sink into the bones of the building itself, the scuffed tiles, the old counter, the smell of cinnamon that still lingered as if Ellie herself had just stepped into the back kitchen. And then, one by one, the townspeople stepped forward. Kara was the first, apron still tied, cheeks red with shame. She walked out from behind the counter and stood beside General Sloane. "I didn't say anything that day. I just watched it happen. And I've regretted it every second since." Her voice cracked. "I was a kid when my dad came back from Iraq. He didn't talk for 6 months. Ellie was the only one who could get him to laugh." She looked at Sloane. "This place was never just a bakery." Then came Mr. Harmon, the gruff fisherman. He placed a worn navy cap on the counter. "She let me leave it here during winter. She said it deserved to be warm too." Then he cleared his throat and stepped back into the crowd, eyes glistening. Soon, it became a procession, like a quiet confessional.
One by one, neighbors who had once looked away now spoke up. Stories of Ellie's gentle insistence that everyone mattered. Veterans, teenagers, widows, strays. She hadn't just run a bakery, she had built a refuge, and they had all let her be exiled from it, without a word. And then, as if summoned by something ancient and tender, Joe Rivera walked in. The crowd parted. No one dared speak. His hoodie was zipped, his hands trembled slightly, but his stride, quiet and steady, carried more weight than anyone else's. Baxter, ever faithful, padded beside him, tail swaying like a low metronome of memory. Joe didn't address the crowd. He didn't need to. He walked straight to the counter, placed one hand on the wood where Ellie had once leaned every morning, and whispered only 3 words. "She saved me." Then he turned, slowly, and looked out at the faces that had once looked past him. "And you let them take her from here," he said, no malice in his voice, only truth. "Over a dog, over a moment when decency could have spoken but stayed silent." People bowed their heads. Joe stepped back, Baxter curled at his feet. The stillness was broken only by the sound of the bakery's door opening once more. Ellie, stood in the doorway. She didn't wear her apron, no flour on her hands, just jeans, a soft sweater, and that quiet strength she had never needed to announce. The convoy was gone now, but its echo remained, and it led her home. "I thought I was done here," she said softly. "I thought maybe the town had moved on." She glanced at Kara, at Mr. Harmon, at Joe. But kindness doesn't disappear. It just hides until someone's brave enough to call it back. General Sloan stepped beside her, holding a polished plaque. "Ellie Hopkins, on behalf of the Department of Defense, the Raven Point Veterans Network, and the Joint Civilian Service Commission, I hereby present you with the Civilian Bravery Award for outstanding service to American veterans through personal sacrifice and community action." Ellie's hands shook slightly as she took the plaque. She stared at it, not out of pride, but disbelief. "I just gave people coffee," she whispered. "You gave them sanctuary, the kind no institution could ever replicate." At that moment, the mayor stepped forward, carrying a heavy leather folder. He cleared his throat nervously. "Ellie Hopkins, this town failed you, but we intend to make it right." He opened the folder and pulled out some documents. "As of today, this building, formerly under lease to Brioche & Co., is being transferred to your ownership, free and clear." Gasps. Applause. Ellie stared. "What?" Vivian Chambers, red-faced and tense, stood in the corner, silent for the first time in her professional life. She knew a PR disaster when she saw one, and this one was irreversible. Her mouth opened, but the mayor silenced her with a glance. "The town voted last night, unanimously." Ellie blinked. "I don't know what to say." Joe rose to stand beside her. "Then let your actions speak, like they always have." General Sloan extended another envelope, not crisp like the last, but well-worn, as if passed from hand to hand. "There's something else. We've been planning a veteran transition center, something permanent, personal, a place where coming home isn't just paperwork. We were going to build it on base, but—" He looked around the room, then back at Ellie. "We'd like you to lead it. Here, in Ashwood." "Me?" "You've already done the work for years. You just didn't have a nameplate for it." She hesitated, looked at Joe, at Baxter, then out the window where the convoy had once stood. "One condition. Service dogs stay. Always." Sloan smiled. "Non-negotiable." The transition center would be housed in the old library, a stone building with tall windows and creaky floors, a place filled with memory and room to heal. Renovations would begin the next week. Veterans from all over the state had already begun signing up. And as the crowd cheered, Ellie stepped back behind the counter one last time, just for a moment, and placed her hand where the register used to be. It wasn't about pastries anymore. It was about purpose. 6 months later, the sign still read Ellie's house, but something had changed. The smell of cinnamon still lingered in the woodwork. The bell above the door still chimed. But now, instead of cash registers and pastry trays, the space was filled with something quieter. The low murmur of conversation between men and women learning to feel human again. Ellie had transformed the old library with patience, grit, and heart. Where books once gathered dust, now there were armchairs facing soft-lit windows, therapy dogs napping at the feet of their owners, and bulletin boards covered with job listings, group schedules, and photos of veterans who had found their way back from the edges of silence. The Ashwood Veteran Transition Center wasn't a government building. It didn't feel like an office. It felt like home. There were no intake forms at the door, just a bell, a welcome, and sometimes a warm drink if you looked like you hadn't had one in a while. Joe came every Tuesday. He didn't speak much, but he didn't have to. He ran a writing group for veterans who couldn't talk about what they'd seen, but could still write about what they'd lost. His dog Baxter had become a kind of unofficial mascot, always curled under someone's chair, offering silent loyalty. And Ellie? She never called herself a director or counselor. She just showed up, day after day. She listened. She took calls. She made lists. She reminded people that healing wasn't a program. It was a place and a person you trusted not to flinch when you were at your worst. The transition center had ripple effects no one expected. Marriages began to mend. Kids visited their parents on weekends again. One veteran, who hadn't spoken in over a year, picked up a guitar during music therapy and played the opening chords to Take It Easy. Nobody said anything. They just listened, tears slipping down quiet faces. Ellie never stood in the spotlight. She declined interviews. She turned down offers to write a book or film a documentary. "It's not my story," she'd say. "It's theirs." But one afternoon in March, a letter arrived in an embossed envelope bearing the seal of the Department of Veteran Affairs. She'd been nominated, anonymously, for the National Heart in Service Award, a civilian honor given to those who showed exceptional commitment to those who served. Ellie didn't want to go, but Joe insisted. "You don't go for you. You go so the next person like you gets permission to start small." So she went. At the ceremony in Washington, D.C., she stood on a stage in front of senators, generals, and Gold Star families. She wore a simple black dress, no makeup, no speech prepared, just the quiet presence that had always been her strength. "I'm not a hero," she began, voice steady but soft. "I just refused to turn away a man who had only a dog and a memory left." Turns out, that was enough. The room was silent for a moment, not from indifference, but reverence. And then applause rose, rising like a tide that washed over her until she had to look down, humbled. Back in Ashwood, a new photo hung on the wall of the center. Ellie didn't pose for it. It was candid. Her laughing with Joe during a garden workday, both of them covered in dirt, with Baxter asleep between them. Below the frame, on a small bronze plaque, the words, "Honor begins with kindness." Life settled again, not into sameness, but into rhythm. New veterans arrived, some hesitant, some skeptical, but all welcomed. A former Navy nurse ran the evening meditation sessions. A Marine who once slept in his truck was now the center's logistics coordinator. Ellie never stopped working, never stopped listening, but she allowed herself one new ritual. Each morning, before unlocking the doors, she'd sit alone in the front room, once a bakery, now a sanctuary. She'd sip tea and look at the seat where Joe first sat, back when no one else did. Sometimes she'd hear Baxter's tags jingle in the hall, and she'd smile. Because some things, the real things, never leave you. The world doesn't change because of grand speeches or viral videos. It changes when one person chooses kindness over comfort, courage over convenience. Ellie Hopkins was never seeking recognition. She just refused to walk away from someone the world had forgotten. And in doing so, she reminded an entire town, and thousands beyond it, that honor lives quietly, but it speaks louder than shame. So look closer. Sit beside the person others ignore. Ask the question nobody else is asking. Because sometimes, all it takes to save a life is a place to sit and someone who cares enough to stay.